Alright guys, so the next rule that we want to discuss is data page. Okay? Data page is a very critical rule in Pega that we use to get the data from different sources. Okay, um, we might get the data using an integration. That too we can get using database. We can get the data from the database table local to Pega. We can get the data from an external database table that is mapped to Pega. We can generate the data based on some logic and put that on the data page. So data page is basically a data placeholder which fetches the data from a source. Now the source can be your database table, some integration, some rule where we will logically generate the data. Tools like data transform, activity, etc. It can also get the data using some robotics and several other methods are available. Okay, why do we leverage that? Remember, this is like the name itself suggests, it's a kind of page. Okay, of course it has a structure. It can be page of single, it can be single page or page list. Okay, in the structure wise, but this is a page that we can load on the clipboard and then read from it. So whenever we need a data, we need data. Let's say that I need data employee record, which is in a different application. So I'll configure a data page, which where I will configure the integration, which will actually fetch the data from the source, the third-party application. Whenever I'll need that data, I'll refer this data page into my data transform, into my activity, or several other rules. I can leverage the data page to show the data on the section as well. Okay, whenever we need it. So this is basically a way, a mechanism to get the data from different sources. There are a few things that we need to understand. First is structure. The data page can be of type page or list. You already understand what the page and list is. Page means just one record of that object, like customer data, one customer, or we might get list of customer, right? So accordingly, page or list. Then there is type basically in terms of whether it is read only. Let me open a data page. Okay, um, this should have a data page. It's again in the data model category, data page, right? So structure can be page or page list. Sorry, this is mode, right? Mode can be read only. That means we can get the data and read it on the clipboard. We cannot modify it. Then editable, that we can read the data on the data page, and on the clipboard we can edit the data on the data page. Remember, you can edit it on the clipboard on the data page only. It's not going to edit the data from the source from where it actually fetched it. And the third option is savable. Savable means that you can load the data, edit it on the clipboard, and save it back to the source from where you got the data. Of course, if it is savable, you will have to write logic to save it back to source. Okay. Then we have something called scope. Scope is something I'll discuss later, or let me discuss that right away. In scope, we have three scope: thread, requester, and thread, requester, and node. Now, what does that means? Thread means that this data that it is loading is relevant for that particular thread only. Relevant to one thread or case. It's not relevant to any other case. So for example, if I'm getting the credit score for a loan application, and that credit score I'm getting using a data page. Now the data of that data page, whatever data is there on the data page related to that particular customer, it cannot be used in any other case, right? So that's this, whenever we need to load the data which is relevant, which makes sense for one particular case, one particular thread, we declare the data page as thread only. Requester is basically when we need to load the data which is relevant for that operator or requester. For example, when I'm doing the case processing, let's say I am an agent and I'm approving a case. And when I'm approving a case, my manager ID and other details are getting updated in the case. Now that my manager ID and my other details are stored into HRMS system, that has to be bring in there. So I will write an integration or something using a data page. I will get that data, and I'll write some rule basically that will read the data from the data page and write it on the application. Who is approving it? What is the approver's manager name and all those stuff. Now, whatever number of case I work, all are going to have the same detail because I am the requester, I am the approver, right? So whenever we fetch the data which is relevant to particular requester, doesn't matter on how many cases that guy is working or girl is working, okay? We load the data, we load the data using requesters. The benefit of it is that it is not going to be basically loaded in the clipboard for every case. We don't need to load it every case. Thread was needed because every case has had a different data. Requester for every case it is same. It is based on the requester itself, so it should not be loaded. So even if I'm working on 1,000 cases, only one data page has to be loaded, and that will be applicable to all those 1,000 cases. Then there comes the node label. This is relevant for all users and cases on that node. Threads on the node. It's a kind of static data that we try to load, right? Remember, some stuff like currency conversion rate. It doesn't really matter which user is or what case is. The USD to INR currency conversion is going to be same for everyone, and we might be getting that from a different system, right? Certain reference data doesn't really matter which user or which case you're working on, that's going to be the same. So why do I need to load it for every case or for every user? I should instead just load it for the node, and everyone will use one single data. Even if they're processing, there are 10 user and they all are processing 1,000 cases, 10,000 cases are being processed, so I will load just one data page, they all will refer to that. When you create a data page of type node label data pages cannot be editable or savable. They are only read only, because otherwise you cannot control who is editing, who is not editing. It is accessible to everyone, right? So it cannot be read. It cannot be other than read only. If you set a node label, so for example, if I make it node label, actually, 1 second, sorry. See, if it is savable, then it is a requester or thread only. If it is editable, it is requester and thread only. You don't get to create node label. Node label will only be available if it is read only. Okay. So these are the important factor to consider for the data page. The source, like we discussed, the source can be lookup. Lookup is basically a class lookup. When you have the primary key of a class, you can use lookup to get the data. You will have to pass the parameter primary key as a parameter for that. Then you have connector, that is for the integration. You have data transform. You have report definition. Report definition are another type of rule in Pega, which actually kind of SQL query, but in a visual way. Activity is another rule type we will talk about. Robotic is another way of getting the data. Aggregation is that you are getting the data using multiple sources. Okay, so you have multiple connector data, all I mean connector, maybe report definition, maybe lookup, maybe, and then you are combining the result. That's the aggregation. There are multiple sources. All right. So with this basically brief introduction of data page, let's see an application for it. Okay, let's see how we can leverage this and how we can practice on that. Okay, sorry, customer. So this is our loan application. When I'm doing a loan application, actually I might ask the user to tell me whether they are existing customer or not. If they are existing customer, I will ask them to provide their customer ID and I'll load the data myself. If they say no, I'm not an existing customer, then I will basically let them load the data, let them enter the data. Make sense? Existing customer do not have to submit all the details again. So I'm going to, we already have created a, data type, customer data type, right? I'm going to make this as a local table. Okay, I'm going to make it concrete. At the moment it is abstract. So I'm going to add another field here, customer ID, CID. Okay, that we will use as a primary key. Submit. So in order to make it permanent, sorry, make it concrete, you need to have a database table. You can create that all backend from the backend and then reconfigure it here. But instead of doing that, let's do it through the data designer itself. So go to the sources and configure a local source for it. That's how we will create a table for it. It will automatically internally convert this into a concrete class and create table. So it is asking you to provide the key. Which one are you going to use as a key? I'll select CID as a key. This is also going to generate certain data pages by default. These data pages will be generated to for different purpose we'll talk about. And this is by default because it is scalar, right? These are all scalar. This is by default going into the customer data schema. I can change it to Pega data if I wish to, but let's keep it customer data. Submit it. All right. So now this is created. Close it. A source has been configured here. Okay. It's loading. A few data pages were also created. The Pega is taking some time to configure everything. But anyway, now this data designer is directly talking to your database table. It has, if I open this class, I can see which table it is mapped to. Test connection. It is mapped to this table. This is a new table that got created in the customer data schema. You also see that it is CID is being used as a key and this is a concrete class. Okay. So this is all done, right? If I insert any record in that table, it will automatically be visible here. If I insert any record here, that will automatically be visible in the table. You can also see the table information by clicking on the record tab, action, and show database information. See, this is the table name. If you want to see the data there, just see no record. CID is primary key and all that details. Every column. This is customer data. Remember flat tables. Every column is automatically exposed. There is no blob. Now let's insert a record there. So I'm going to insert a record from here. Add record. I'll say CIDC1 is now. You just tab out, it will automatically save it. Now go back to the database and run this query again. See, there's an insert, there's a record. I might insert here as well, and that will also be visible immediately there in the Pega data designer. Okay, let's add one more record. Okay. See if this is also reflected there. Yeah, it's all good. Coming up nicely. Good. Now let's modify our screen. Okay. So this is our work. The first section there is loan application, submit loan application. So we are displaying the customer record. Now this one is asking the customer to insert the record. That is fine. Absolutely. But before that, we will have to ask the customer whether they are an existing customer or a new basically, or an old customer. Sorry, a new customer. So I'm going to create another property in the this is a work class property. Okay, it is used to process for the work processing, and it doesn't have a related model. It is not an object. Okay, that whether are you existing customer or not. So I'm going to create a property here, and this property is going to be true or false. Is new cust. This is true or false. Boolean basically. So either true or false. Now I'm going to basically ask the user to tell me whether they are new or old. So I can have a drop down, I can have a radio button, but best is radio button, true or false with two options, okay? And bring it on the top. So the property is new customer. That's where we are going to store the value, okay? That's it. I can edit the label. Are you new customer for us? Okay, let's see how does it look like. You can preview a section without running a case. True or false, right? Are you a new customer for us? True. I can change it to yes and no as well, but let's just keep it true and false at the moment. Mm, okay. So when they say true, okay, when they say it false, that means they are existing customer, okay. If they say existing customer, we will ask them to provide their customer ID. So we will create another placeholder in the work class, another property to hold their customer ID, whatever they are providing, just ID. Text, that is okay. Now I'll add another text input and we will ask what is your customer ID? Sorry, not this one. this one. Let me drag it on the top, sorry, second, and we will say cust ID. Give us your cust ID, customer ID. So we'll ask, what is your customer ID? Please help us with your customer ID. Now this please help us with your customer ID. This should only be visible if this is false. If they are new customer, we will not ask them to provide their customer ID, right? So we will check a visibility here, and this should be visible. It should be visible with I can run a when rule. I can say if not blank, not zero, and all that, or a when rule or a condition. We will type an expression. If the new customer ID value of this is false, then only display it. And run the visibility on the client, so it will show you directly. It will not have to wait for the server processing. As for you change the true and false, it will change the visibility right away. Let's see, preview it. So at the moment nothing, so that field is not displayed. As soon as you select false, it says please help with your customer ID. If you say true, it's gone. False shows true, gone. False shows true, gone. Right. Now, when the customer has given you the customer ID, in case they are existing customer, what should you do? You should load the data and display that data. So this one, this customer detail is actually loading the data from the customer property that you have created. We will load the data from the database and pre-populate the data of the customer data in the customer property, so that user doesn't have to enter it. It will be taken from the, where is the data model? It will be taken from the database. So first, after you get the customer ID, you need to get the data from the database. So there is a default data page already created, but let's create our own data page, okay? In the customer class. So remember, CID is the key for this class, and we are asking the user to enter the CID only, the customer ID. So we can create a data page that will use lookup to get the data. So create a new data page. It is again a data model type. Get customer record. By default, Pega uses D underscore for every data page so that we know it is a data page. Get customer record. Now this will fetch the customer record based on a parameter. Parameter is customer ID. Cust ID. So you need to add the customer ID on the parameter tab of the data page. And this is required. It is of type string and this is required. Okay, cust ID. Now this is one single customer, and this is going to be different for every customer, so it has to be thread, and we will only use it for read only because we have the primary key in the parameter. So we will use lookup and select the class from where the data is supposed to be loaded. The data is loaded from the customer data class and pass the parameter. So it is asking to pass you the CID. Remember, any parameter in Pega is accessed using a keyword called param. Param means parameter. So whatever parameter that we have on the database, param dot cust ID. So I'm passing the parameter customer ID as a CID. Submit it and let's save it. Now this database is ready. Let's run it. If you execute it, it will ask you to provide the customer ID as a parameter, right? I am going to run it for C1. See, it fetches the record of that customer, every detail that is there, the name, DOB, first name, full name, last name, all the details have been populated. Now remember, on the case, actually when you run the loan, if it is saying false, it is saying true, then it is gone. If it is saying false, then if someone is entering the cust ID, then you should pre-populate these values. Now these values is being read. You remember we used the customer property. So the customer property value are being shown here. So as soon as someone is providing the CID, on the change of it, if it is not null, you should get the data from the database and populate that data on the customer property, right? So let's create an action set on the customer ID field. Let's go back to the customer, and whenever it is being changed, we will, whenever this value, sorry, not click, whenever this value is being changed, first of all we will post that to the clipboard, because we are going to run a rule, right? The rule will read from the server only. So we will post the value, and then we will run a data transform, or actually we will refresh the section, and then under that we will run a data transform, populate customer data. Data transform, you already know that. Now let's create an open. So the customer ID basically is available on the work page, right, under the property called cust ID. So what we will do is, first we will check when the cust ID is not null. Okay, it's not automatically getting, but that's okay, it's in the same class. So if customer ID is null, then you will not do anything. Okay, then you will simply, if customer ID is not null, then you will update the customer page with the values from the data page that we created. Now this database will automatically load when you refer it, but it needs to have parameter. The parameter that it needs, we pass that parameter in a square bracket in data page. Okay, the parameter that it needs, its name is customer ID. It needs this parameter, and the value of this is going to be passed from this customer ID property, because that's where the customer ID is stored. So this means that the customer ID value is being passed as a parameter to this data page, and then this data page will be loaded, and we are reading from that, and we are setting CID equals to CID. Then we are setting DOB equals to whatever we are getting from the database. Then this is on the case, we are setting this on the case, and this is we are getting from the database. Then because we need to show it on the case, right? Email, then first name, then last name, maybe full name, last name, phone number, phone number, salary, salary, type, title is title. We updated the value. Now it says that it cannot find out the class of this record. Okay, so the class, it is not able to define which class. This is not able to find that this is a customer class, so that's okay. This data page is of the customer class, so you need to define which class this data page is. So for that we use pages and classes, place the data page name and the class that it belongs to, the object, that type that it loads. Basically every data page needs to have an object type shaped. Now this, whenever it is not null, okay, it is going to run this data page on change of it. Let's configure it here. Customer to populate customer d customer, where is that section? Okay. um okay, populated it and refresh it, submit it, save it. Let's run it. Let's create a new case. So are you new customer for us? No. False. Please help with your C1. See, auto populated the value. If I make it null, it isn't removing the value. That's the problem. It should ideally remove the value. Okay, when it is being nullified. So we will have to handle that. When the customer ID is null, do this. Otherwise, when or otherwise, simply otherwise, when remove the page. But if you remove the customer page, then you will have to initialize it again. So remove everything and then add first name as null. Okay, first remove it, then initialize one property. I mean, we can just remove one by one all the pages, all the properties, but that will, for that we will have to write a lot of line. Now if you do this again, true, false, let's change it, C2. Okay, it's loading the C2 data. Now remove it. See, wiped out. C1 again loaded. C2 null 0. There's one more thing. When you loaded the data this first time, it was actually showing you the help with us, and it was showing this section as well. Actually, ideally, first question should be true or false. When you select that true or false, accordingly, it should display the sections, okay, other part. So let's do that as well. So this should be visible only when is new customer false, is new customer not true. Let me see what impact does that have. Okay, so at the moment, true. Oh, it's actually the reverse. One second. Should be visible. Is new customer true? Is new customer false? This, okay, and by default we will set it to mm, okay. Why is it still showing? Okay, because there is no value to this, right? False, true, gone, false, true, gone. So by default we will set it to false. If we want to set something by default, we will set it here in the py default. So is new customer, we will say false. Okay, good. That's one thing. Then you should show this one, this section for both scenario. This should not be null basically. Okay, so this should be visible, visibility expression, when is new customer not null. I mean, there's a value on that. True or false in both scenario, we'll have to display that, right? So let's see. So at this point of time, BC, false, true, gone, false. Okay. C1, why is that not visible? 1 second, there's a problem with that. We said it should be visible. Is okay. It should be visible if either is new customer equal to true or false, or is new customer equal to false. When it is null, then it should not be visible. Okay, let's see. Answer. Let's create a new case. Anyway, we are initializing. Okay, let's remove the initialization. That's causing a problem. Okay, where is this field default? Data model, data transform, set field default. We'll remove this false, and then in the customer, where is that? Submit loan application. This should be visible when it is false, when this is not null, and is new customer not null. It should be not null and it should be false. Let's see. Good. So in either case, if it is true, then don't show that. If it is false, then it should have shown us. Are we doing the post value? 1 second. Submit loan post value. We are doing that probably. Yeah. Okay. When we are posting this, the true and false action. Okay. On change, let me post the value, and I'll not run it on the client. I'll run it on the server so that it works fine. This one too. Okay, let's create a new case. Okay, if I say true or if I say false. Okay, I'll have to refresh the section too. True, false. Perfect. Now it's running perfectly fine. When it is false and CID is null, this should not be shown, right? This is also a good condition. So either it's true or if it is false and customer ID is not null, then it should be shown. Let's try then testing that. So if it is true, it should be shown. On false, Okay, customer ID is still null. Launch a new case. True, shown, false. It should not be visible. It is false, and either it is true or new customer ID. Sorry, new customer is false and is not null. This is correct, right? Anyway, we'll discuss about that expression later. All right, so this is created and this is showing you the result. Okay, there's one more thing. If customer is entering this data, this should ideally be read only, right? We should let the user modify. Up to you what you want to do. I mean, we are not saving it back at yet. It is still going to be in the case. In the next session, we will basically learn about how to save the data back to a different table. Okay, maybe a new record. How do we insert a new record? How do we update an existing record? So these are the things that we will talk about in the next session. So in this demo, basically, we learned about the data pages, structure, scope, and everything, and we configured one data page that fetches the record of the customer based on the customer ID entered by the user, and it shows on the screen. We also utilize data transform to copy the table data from the table to the property. See, we could have avoided copying the data. You know what? We could directly, actually, let me hide this section, okay? The customer section. Let me hide it always. So I'm going to set the visibility when condition. There is an out of the box condition, never. It will never be visible. I could directly use the data page here, by the way. So this will never be visible. You remember when we were doing the embedding section, we used the clipboard page. Instead of clipboard page, I can use the data page now. And the data page is this one. I can directly use the data page to show the data without involving any property, without copying that into the property. It's just that if you copy that in the property, so it will be saved in the database as a part of work object. If you don't, then it will not be saved. If you do not need to save the data in the data page, in the work object, you do not need to um, copy that data over. You can directly use the data and get away with that. Customer, see, this is going to be from the customer ID. I can directly pass the parameter. It is asking me to provide the parameter. This is there, and I can use that section. Save it. I can directly leverage that. False. C1. See, now this one is, if you look at the clipboard, the customer is not, okay, we are still copying the data because we are running the data transform. Let me don't run the data transform for the moment. So what I'll do is I'll add one more step here above, and on the above step I will exit the data transform without executing it. So it will not set it. Okay, let's create a new case. To say false, C1. See, now if you look at the clipboard, it's not assigning the value in the customer property. Nothing, right? But we are showing the data. The data can be seen in the data page category here. It was thread label, and that's the data page C1. This was initially loaded when we basically did not have a customer ID. Okay, but this is another use case. But right now I'm going to disable the data page one, and I'm going to continue with this one. So this is, let's put its visibility always at the moment, and don't show this one. Visibility I'll set to this one, never. So this is how data page can be leveraged to directly get the data from different sources and show that on the screen without copying that over to any table or any property or any class. I know this has been a little bit lengthy demo, but this is very critical demo, and this actually tells you how to use data page to get the data, use it and display it, or use it in whatever way you want to. This demo concludes here.